Good evening, everyone. Welcome to session 3 of the TWU Bold Leadership Speaker Series. I am here, we are here on behalf of the College of Business and the TWU Jane Nelson Institute for Women's Leadership, who are our sponsors for tonight. We have been having an amazing time covering some topics that are important of great importance to women leaders, and we've had some amazing speakers in this series. Tonight, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Dr. Dewana Horn, and I'm Associate Dean in the College of Business and also Associate Professor of Management. And with me, I have Dr. Ramal Yelker, and she is Dean of the College of Business. And we're on rare occasion, we're here together tonight. We're normally in separate locations because TWU has campuses in Houston, Dallas, and Denton, and I serve at the Houston campus teaching primarily in the MBA program, and she serves at our main location, which is in Denton. But she's here tonight, and we're both going to do this together on the same screen for it's not often that we're together. But our topic for tonight is imposter syndrome. But before we get into our topic, I would like for Dr. Yelker to say a few words to you all.
Thank you, Dr. Horn. It's my great pleasure to be co-hosting this Bold Leadership speaker event today from our TWU Houston campus. And I am very delighted that we have with us today Tara Tucker and Angelica Gutierrez to enlighten us and talk to us more about imposter syndrome. I can't wait to hear and learn more about this topic as it's so relevant to both education and in the workplace. So without further ado, I will hand it back over to Dr. Dewana Horn for introductions and starting the program. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Dr. Yelker. And for those of you who don't know much about the TWU College of Business, we offer bachelor's degrees and master's degrees in all disciplines of business. And we also have a focus in healthcare. And our mission is to advance women in leadership in all industries, but especially in healthcare leadership. And we have an excellent 100% online master's degree program. As you can see more information about that running across the bottom of your screen, please check out our website to see our programs, to see more about our faculty, and to see more about our undergraduate programs as well. So I will go ahead and introduce our speakers. First, we have Dr. Angelica Gutierrez, and she earned her BA degree in political science and sociology with honors at UCLA at the University of Michigan. And she earned a Ph.D. at UCLA Anderson School of Management and was a postdoctoral fellow at the National Center for Institutional Diversity and the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. Recognized as one of the world's best 40 under 40 business professors by Poets and Quants, Dr. Gutierrez teaches leadership, negotiations, and diversity management at the undergraduate and graduate level. So she teaches in the MBA program, the Master's of Science and Management program, and also in the Executive MBA program at Loyola Marymount University. She also serves as the director of the Master's of Science and Management program. Dr. Gutierrez has presented her research on diversity and imposter syndrome at national and regional academic conferences and for organizations in the nonprofit, private, and public sectors, including the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Hasbro, Abbott, Google, Fullscreen Studios, Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, Ascend LA, and universities across the nation. So let me tell you all, we have one of the nation's leading experts presenting on this topic tonight. Consistent with her commitment to reducing gender and racial pay disparities, Dr. Gutierrez also teaches employment negotiations to organizations that serve minoritized groups, including the National Latina Women Business Association, Riordan Programs, Adelante Mujer Latina, UCLA Black Business Student Association, UCA Latino Alumni Association, Women in Tech Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, Harvard Medical School, Cambridge Health Alliance. So she is getting around the country and she is on the circuit talking about imposter syndrome and making women aware of this thing that could be a weakness and also an organization's role in imposter syndrome. Thank you, Angelica, for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next, we have Tiara Tucker. Born and raised in Kankakee, Illinois, south of Chicago, and now residing in Dallas, Texas, which is where one of our campuses is. This trailblazer, known as Tiara M. Tucker, is known as an empowerment connector who wears many tiaras. I like that. I like that. To name a few, she is a sought-after and award-winning PR and communications strategist, speaker, coach, community advocate, social justice, and mental health activist, and the visionary founder of Tiara PR Network and Speak That Movement. In March of 2021, Tiara was featured in Black Enterprise as one of the 10 amazing Black women making moves right now. This same year, she was honored as a 40 under 40 by the Dallas Public Relations Society of America and as a Junior League of Collin County Women of Influence Award nominee. Wow. In addition to Tiara PR Network, Tiara passionately leads her charitable nonprofit organization, Speak That Movement, which is on a mission to equip and empower professional women in business along their journeys of dream and goal realization. Tiara is also the creator, host, and executive producer of Speak That Talks, which are live virtual events created to empower, uplift, and connect audience via her unscripted and unedited conversations with guest speakers from all over the world. So you all, we are in for a treat tonight. So as a mindfulness enthusiast who has had battles with anxiety while going after her own dreams, Tiara is dedicated to using her voice and platforms to enrich others. And I believe that we will be enriched tonight by Tiara moderating this event. Welcome, Tiara.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. I'm excited about today.
Okay, well, great. And I'm excited about this conversation. Right now, I am going to leave the stage because I want to hear from you all. So Dr. Yoker and I will be back after this to wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Yoker, and thank you so much, Dr. Horn, for our warm introductions.
Absolutely.
And thank you to all of you in the audience who endured listening to our bios. It is such an honor and pleasure for us to be with you today. So thank you all so much for tuning in. How are you feeling today, Dr. G, as you gave me permission to call you?
I'm super excited to be on this platform, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion on such an important topic. And I do also want to, say thank you to Dr. Horn. She and I go way back, as well as Dr. Lambert. You're probably not going to see him on the screen. He's behind the scenes, but I've known that for many years. And I also want to say a quick thank you to Dr. Yelker and a thank you to you, Ms. Tucker. I am super excited. I'm a big fan of all of your work.
And right back at you. I looked you up. I have started stalking you. So we're now LinkedIn friends. So before we get started, I love interaction from the audience. So I need to know who all is out there. So let us know whether you want to add your city and state to the comments. If you have a business, I just want to know. We want to take this moment to just shout out and support all of the women and men that are tuning in today. So we want to see in the comments, where are you tuning in from today? And this is going to be an interactive experience. So also, if you have any questions, feel free to add them into the comments and we will address them accordingly. And we will also have a portion towards the end where you can ask any questions that you may have. So Houston, Texas. Yes, yes, yes. We have Fort Worth, Texas, TWU, North Richland Hills, Houston, Dallas, Houston. All right, Texas is taking over. I need to know anybody from outside of Texas today.
Austin, Fort Worth. Wow.
Yes. Well, awesome. Keep them coming in. Keep them coming in. We are just honored to have you all here. So let's get started. I'm just really, really excited about talking to you today, Dr. G. It is such an honor. So we heard your amazing and impressive bio. So tell us a little bit more about your personal and professional journey. Like how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. So, oh my goodness. I want to start off by saying that I never even imagined being here. I never imagined earning a PhD or becoming a professor. And to be quite open with you and our audience, I didn't think I was going to make it past high school. And not a lot of people know this, but I actually struggled a lot in grade school. And the reason why I struggled so much is because I had a language barrier. So I grew up speaking only Spanish. So I was born and raised here, but mom actually homeschooled me for the first couple of years of my life. And so, you know, she taught me how to read, write, and do math only in Spanish. And the real reason why she homeschooled me is because my father had a very old school mentality. He actually didn't want me to go to school. And he used to tell my mom, why are you going to put her in school? You know, she's ultimately just going to get married and get pregnant. She's not worth investing much time into. And I still remember hearing this from him as a kid. So, when my mom ended up putting me in elementary school, in the local school, my dad was already, you know, out of the picture by that time. It was then that I just, you know, started struggling academically. And I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it was actually the first time in my life that I actually felt like an imposter. I was a kid. I was probably about, 6 or 7. And I didn't know that there was a term for what I was experiencing. All I knew is that I was in school and I felt like I did not belong. And so I struggled quite a bit. And as a result, of performing so poorly in school, my grade school teacher and my principal actually told my mom that I couldn't continue in that school because it was evident that I had a learning disability. And so that definitely contributed to the stigma of incompetence and unintelligence that I've carried with me, even, into adulthood. So that's just a little bit of my personal background, born and raised here in LA in a small community known as Lincoln Heights, raised by a single mom, very small family. There's just 3 of us. It's always been my brother, my mom, and I. My mom actually went to heaven a year ago. So that's been tough. But I share that early experience because it was actually one of the greatest reasons why I am now researching the imposter syndrome. So, miraculously, I ended up doing well. In high school, I had the right support from mom. I ended up going to, undergrad and pursuing my graduate studies. And so the reason why I became a business school professor is because of first generation college students that I was advising when I was an undergrad at UCLA. So I was like in my junior year, and my work study position was to serve as a peer advisor to primarily freshmen and sophomores. And most of them were Black and brown. And as I mentioned, first generation college students. So what I thought was so interesting is that the majority of them were business econ majors. And I was double majoring in political science, sociology, nothing to do with business. But it was just, hearing about their academic struggles And I was hearing their stories about how inaccessible some of their professors were, that one day I just decided I'm going to go to business school, earn a PhD, and become that business school professor that these students deserve. So that's just a little bit about my personal journey. It was very much like the movie Legally Blonde. I don't know if you watched it.
Yes, I remember that movie.
So you know how that one day just out of the blue she decides, I'm going to go to law school because she
Yes.
went her boyfriend over. Well, for me, it was, I'm going to go to business school. Had no idea what it was going to entail. Had never taken a business class before in my life. But I knew that I wanted to be that professor that these students deserved. So a little bit about my academic background and my current motivation for examining the imposter syndrome. I started experiencing it very young.
Wow, what an incredible story. So thank you for sharing that and allowing us to tap into a little bit of your childhood and your educational career, etc. And I also want to commend you for taking what could have been, an experience that could have just maybe shut you down or made you never want to, pursue your dreams, but you kept moving forward and now you're an inspiration to so many people. That's what I call empowerment.
Thank you.
Yes. So for everybody out here listening, including myself, right? I'm sure if people saw the title of today's event, they probably heard of imposter syndrome, or maybe some have never and they're very curious. So I'll tell you, for me, I first heard of the word or the term imposter syndrome a few years ago when I was working on my Tierra PR Network website. I never heard of it, but my website designer, she and we were talking, and I was like, what am I doing to think I can have a PR business? You know what? I'm not doing this. And she was like, no, that's the imposter syndrome kicking in. Wow. So for those of us who, vaguely know about it or maybe are experiencing it, let us know, based on your research, what exactly is imposter syndrome?
So great question. And then I appreciate you sharing your personal experience, your aha moment, right? Where you actually discovered that it was a thing. I also didn't discover that it was a phenomenon until much later in life. So the imposter syndrome, and I do want to say that those of us that research the imposter syndrome actually try not to call it a syndrome. We refer to it as the imposter phenomenon. And the reason why we avoid referring to it as a syndrome is because the word syndrome connotes some type of a medical condition, right? It suggests as though it's a disease, right? And that can actually make it even more stigmatizing for us to openly discuss our experience. But I know that mainstream media, and when I write for mainstream outlets, most people know it as the imposter syndrome. So I'm going to refer to it as such for purposes of our session. But so what exactly is it? So it refers to feelings of inadequacy. So people may feel unintelligent, incompetent, and they may have this fear that other people around them are going to discover that they actually don't belong in the positions or the spaces that they occupy. And so they may think to themselves, I got into this university, or I got this job, or I got this award because I was just lucky, or I just knew the right people, or they just needed a woman or a person of color in this position, right? They just had to check off those boxes. So those of us that experience imposter syndrome tend to make external attributions for our success. We have a very difficult time internalizing the achievement. So that's a little bit about imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon. So feelings of inadequacy and the tendency to make external attributions for our success, and we have this constant fear that other people are going to discover that we're a fraud, that we actually don't belong in the spaces we occupy.
Wow. And so where does it originate? Like, what is its origin? Like, has it been around a long time?
Yeah, so excellent question. So most of the research on the imposter syndrome has focused at the individual level. So what that means is that it tends to identify things within the person that makes them feel like imposters or makes them more likely to experience imposter syndrome. So some of this research finds, for example, that our childhood experiences, right, can make some of us more likely to feel like imposters in different environments. So I shared a little bit about my childhood experience. There's also studies that find that certain parenting styles can also trigger some imposter feelings. So there's studies, for example, that find that in families where there are multiple kids, some parents are very quick to label their children. So they'll say, oh, this one here, this is the athletic one. Oh, this one here, this is the artistic one. This one here, this is the smart one, the studious one. Well, if you happen to have not been that kid that was labeled the smart one or the studious one, you're very likely to carry the stigma of incompetence or unintelligence into adulthood. And so there's also research that finds that those of us that have certain personality traits are also more likely to experience imposter syndrome. So people that have lower levels of self-esteem, higher levels of neuroticism, higher levels of perfectionism. So most of the research, as I mentioned, looks at these individual level factors. What I argue and what I have found in my own research is that the imposter syndrome can also come from the environment. So the institutions or the organizations that we find ourselves in can actually make us feel like we don't belong. And so that's what my work focuses on, is that, yes, we can have these individual level triggers of imposterism, but guess what? We need to hold organizations, including universities, accountable for triggering some of these feelings, for making some of us feel like we don't really belong in those spaces.
Wow. So after hearing that, and I don't want to go into a different direction with this conversation, but just in my mind, I just thought about diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging as I think about the workplace and various organizations. Any tie-in with that?
Absolutely. So one of the things, and it's certainly related to this push, right? This emphasis now on DEI. All companies are all about DEI. Everybody's waving their DEI flag. And those of us that have been, diversity scholars for many, many years are like, what? Why is it that all of a sudden
this has already been here?
Right? But there are definitely societal events, right, that have kind of pushed a lot of these corporations to start paying attention to DEI. So there's definitely a connection. So one of the things that I find problematic, and I'll tell you why. One of the things that some companies have done is that they claim to try to encourage their employees to bring their authentic selves to work, right? A lot of companies are all about bring your whole self, right? Be authentic. And in reality, professionals of color like you and I don't have that privilege. We can't simply go into certain spaces and be ourselves because we then face certain backlash, right? And there's a lot of research that finds that when we try to be ourselves, whether it's speaking our native language or dressing a certain way that we think, brings out our personality, or wearing our hair a certain way, some companies, some employers are very quick to say, that's not appropriate for the workplace. It's not appropriate to do this. And those things that are often deemed inappropriate, what some employers don't recognize is that those things are part of our identity. That's us being our authentic selves to work. And so what's really interesting is that authenticity tends to be very narrowly defined, right? And it's typically defined based on white male standards, right? Their behaviors, their characteristics, even their way of dressing is what's considered acceptable in a lot of these spaces, especially corporate America. And so what ends up happening is that because these definitions of authenticity tend to be so narrow, we are then made to feel like imposters, like we somehow are out of place when we decide to bring who we really are to the workplace. You're telling me I should be authentic. You're telling me you value authenticity. So when I bring it, you tell me it's inappropriate and that I should actually be conforming to this other standard, right, of authenticity. And so it's natural that many of us may feel like imposters because we're essentially forced to engage in behaviors and look like something that we're actually not at our core. But we're doing it because we want to conform to those standards, right?
Yes. Wow. Thank you for tying that in, because like you said, those are buzzwords, but I appreciate you making that connection. So you talked a little bit about, your early childhood with, when you didn't even realize you were dealing with imposter syndrome. So are there any other examples throughout your, say, personal or professional life, or even maybe now, although you research the topic and you educate others, but do you still deal with it?
Absolutely. And I think, those of us that are women, faculty at business schools, there's a lot of research on this actually that do find that we tend to be questioned more often by students. Our competence tends to be questioned a lot more just because we're not necessarily the stereotypical professor that's associated with a business school, which is typically an older white male. And so as being one of the few Latina business school professors in the nation, I definitely continue to feel like an imposter. I definitely feel as though I don't belong especially when I go to conferences. And the reason why I often feel that way is because I'm looking around, and when I don't see many people who look like me, it's very natural to think, oh, shoot, I must not belong here, because if I did belong, there would be other people here who look like me, but they're not. Right. So those types of spaces, so like conferences or different, academic spaces, can definitely make me feel like an imposter and trigger some of those feelings. And also, one of the questions that I get most often is, what do you do for a living? Right? I'm sure a lot of us get that question. And you know what? It's a great conversation starter. It's a very normal question to ask.
Yeah.
What's not normal is the type of reaction that I often get. As soon as I say, oh, I'm a professor. And they're like, really? You're a professor? You don't look like a professor.
Oh, wow.
And so they often follow up with like, are you like an instructor? You teach a couple of classes? Like, what do you do for full time? And I'm like, no, I'm a fully tenured professor at a university and I teach at a business school. And so I often get that response, which is just, surprise followed up with, you don't look like a professor. So that definitely makes me feel like an imposter, right?
Yes, I bet.
Right? Because it's like, okay, Kearney, I don't look like the person that should be at a university, right? So, yeah. I mean, and they seem like harmless conversations, but for those of us that have experienced imposter syndrome, they can be triggering.
Yeah, definitely. And that also makes me think about, just as individuals, being mindful of the things that we say to other people, right? Because what might seem like a very harmless question or a harmless reaction, that can also trigger the feelings of, oh, wow, well, maybe I'm not what I should look like, or maybe I don't fit the picture. So I know we can go on and on with this conversation and this topic, but I want to address a question that I was ready to ask as well. So thank you, Kelly Weaver, for getting us here to this question. So let's free some people today, Dr. G. Let's offer some freedom today. Those that are struggling with imposter syndrome, those of us who know that it's lingering in our back door or at the front door. What are some strategies that you use to overcome the experiences of imposter syndrome? So how can you free us from this?
Yeah, so there's there's a few strategies that I've written about. There's been a couple of articles, but one article in Diversity Professional magazine, there were 5 strategies that I identified. So I'm happy to share a couple of those. So one of the most effective strategies is to simply name it, to be able to identify it as the imposter syndrome or the imposter phenomenon. Because there's a lot of research in psychology that finds that once we actually name the thing that we fear, we help extract its power. And so it's less debilitating for us. And there was this comment that J.K. Rowling, so J.K. Rowling, we're all familiar with her, author of Harry Potter books. She was in an interview and she said something that was so powerful, and it really stuck with me. So she said something like, fear of naming the thing that we fear only increases fear in the thing itself. So name it. It's called the imposter syndrome. Also, try to identify the origins of these imposter feelings. Try to figure out where this imposter syndrome is coming from. Is it a function of our childhood experiences? Is it the environment that is making us feel like we don't belong? Right? Where exactly are these feelings being triggered from? And there's a lot of studies, and again, in the field of psychology, that do find that once we're able to identify the source of the issue, the trigger, the origin, we'll be in a much better position to counter its effects. So those are a couple of strategies. One that I have found extremely powerful, and I'm glad that you mentioned your personal experience with imposter syndrome earlier. You mentioned that your friend had helped you identify it. So one of the things that we can do is identify a confidant. So somebody that we can just be very raw and vulnerable with. It's important to have at least 1 or 2 individuals that you can share those imposter feelings with. So that when they come up for you, when you start feeling like, you know what, I feel, incompetent, or I said something and it made me feel like unintelligent, or you know what, I don't really think I can do this. I don't think that I actually should have received this position, or I don't think that I should have been admitted to this program. I really don't belong. I'm a fraud. I feel like I don't have what it takes. So by expressing those concerns or those fears or those feelings to that person, one of the most powerful questions that person can then ask you is, what evidence do you have that suggests you're actually a fraud and that you don't belong in this position or you don't belong in this space? Because by asking you that question, that confidant has now forced you to look for evidence or look for data that's going to support the narrative that is playing in our head. And we'll discover that, hey, actually, no, there isn't evidence to suggest that I am incompetent or that I am unintelligent, right? And the person can also help remind you what you have achieved. So one of the things that's also very effective is to maintain and to take inventory of all of your successes, so that when you start questioning whether you have what it takes to get to the next level, you can remind yourself, you know what, I didn't think I had what it took to do X, Y, and Z, but I was able to achieve those things. And I'll be very open with you. My imposter syndrome comes up a lot, as I mentioned earlier, here in academia as a professor. You know, every time I step into the classroom, I'm like, oh, shoot, am I going to make sense? Like, are students going to understand what I'm saying? Am I going to add value to their learning experience? So one of the things that I do here in my office is I surround myself with, my degrees, my diplomas are all framed. I frame newspaper articles, the interviews that I've done. I have my trophy tower here. And those are just reminders to me that, you know what, I am qualified. I do belong here. So
I love those. I mean, those are all such good strategies. Like, name it, identify the source, have someone to talk to. And if you don't have anyone to talk to, I believe get in the mirror and talk to yourself, right? Tell yourself that you are amazing and you are qualified and you can, achieve the success you desire. And I love what you said about, like, surround yourself with those reminders. Like, that is really, really, really good. So, and hey, everybody out there, if you have any strategies that maybe work for you, feel free, add them in the chat session, because this is really helpful. So we have another question here that I want to bring up. We can bring that one back up. So you experience imposter syndrome in your professional life. Outside of your early childhood, do you experience it in your personal life? I do, and find it happening often as a woman of color. So I know you kind of addressed the first part of that question, but I definitely want to make sure we take the time to address this question and comment.
Wow, such a great question. So do I experience it in my personal life? Yes, I do. And I can't believe I'm going to share this, but I'll just share. So I became a homeowner, the first person in my family to own a home. In 29, I went into escrow actually 2020, just last year, and closed on it in April.
Congrats.
Thank you. But imposter syndrome meets me at the door sometimes when I get to my house, because I'm thinking like, oh shoot, am I gonna be able to continue making the payments? Like, does this really belong to me? Am I gonna have what it takes to maintain it? So it definitely came up in terms of owning a home. There was a part of me that felt like I'm not worthy of owning something of this value. And I think it's because ever since I was a little girl, based on the observations that I was making about other people, it seemed like I had to wait for my husband to come along before I made a purchase of that, size.
Mm-hmm.
So it's come up then, and it's also come up in the dating world.
Oh, that's another conversation.
It is. And I'll just share this real quick. So I had a lot of experiences, but it's not until, the last several years when I started really researching this topic that I realized that I was experiencing imposter syndrome even in the dating arena. So I'll give you a quick example. So I had gone on a date. I was an undergrad at UCLA, and I think I was a sophomore or a junior. And there was this guy that had taken me to a really nice, fancy restaurant in Santa Monica, like overlooking the ocean, super romantic, the kind that, you walk in, there was a piano playing, the kind that, is so expensive that they don't even put the prices on the menu. And so, and so I started feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't belong here. I started feeling like an imposter because everybody around there was white and older, and they looked like they had money. I grew up in a very low income community. Like, we struggle financially. So when I was in that space, I was like, you know what? I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel like I belong. And I'm sure, many of us have now been to those types of restaurants that serve you like very small.
Oh, yes.
So I was really hungry.
Yes. You definitely leave there hungry.
Yeah, I was hungry, right? And then the server comes and puts this little, I don't know what it was, I forgot now. It might have been just a little piece of salmon, right? But inside me, I felt like I didn't belong there. And so even though I was still hungry after I finished it, my date asked me, would you like to order anything else? And I was like, no, I'm totally okay. I got full, so I lied. What did I do? When I went home, I was on my way back home, I pulled up to Jack in the Box.
Yes.
I was still hungry. And so right when I'm pulling up to the speaker, my date, he calls and he's like, oh, I'm just calling to see that you got home okay. And right when he's asking me, you hear in the background in the speaker, welcome to Jack in the Box.
Yeah, take your order.
And so I was like, he's like, what are you doing ordering food? I asked you at the restaurant if you wanted to order an additional item. And I was like, I know I was still hungry, but I just felt uncomfortable. Like I didn't belong there. And part of me was feeling like it was too expensive, who am I to spend this much money on myself? And anyway, so it definitely has come up in different areas of my life. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for those examples. Thank you for the humor. It definitely reminds us that even something that can be, as, I don't know, as deep as imposter syndrome, there's also life, right? There's also opportunities to laugh about it and say, you know what? No, not today. I'm going to get my steak and I might get a second steak, but I'm going to eat because I belong here. Well, thank you so much, Dr. G. So I think we have time for maybe one more, maybe two more questions because we're going to bring Dr. Yoker and Dr. Horn back up in a moment. So Kelly Weaver states, it sounds like tokenism in the workplace plays a big role in the feelings associated with imposter syndrome. Do you know how gatekeeping, token employees, even unintentionally restricting access to other potential token employees, interacts with imposter syndrome?
Oh,
Wow.
that's another great question.
Very good.
So absolutely, tokenism definitely contributes to the imposter syndrome because if you're the only or one of the very few people from your ethnic group or perhaps the only woman, you're very likely to feel isolated and you're very likely to feel like you don't belong because, you know, as we mentioned earlier, there aren't other people who look like us. So we're thinking if we really did belong, there would be people here who look like me, but they're not here. So I must not belong. So tokenism definitely can trigger those imposter feelings and make imposterism even more debilitating, right? It can keep us from applying for promotions. It can keep us from negotiating job offers, right? Because we feel like we should be grateful because we're the only ones that made it this far. So it can definitely trigger imposterism. In terms of employers keeping employees from interacting with others, I could see that making imposterism even more severe or triggering it because it cuts off any connection that you may have to other individuals with whom you could relate. So that could be an even more isolating experience and increase those feelings of not belonging or not deserving the spaces that you occupy. But there hasn't been any research in terms of how an employer explicitly cutting contact or connection with other employees can make this imposter experience even more debilitating, what the effects may be. So that's a very good empirical question.
That was a really good question.
Yeah.
So there's another question here. So taking pride in ourselves and our accomplishments doesn't mean we need to get rid of humility, but we should be able to validate things that make us feel worthy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's something that we often struggle with as women, right? We're very quick to give the credit for any achievements to other individuals or to make external attributions for our success. But absolutely, we're worthy of everything that we earn, right? We work just as hard as everyone else. And you're right. We should definitely own it.
That's right. And a lot of good comments out here. People are telling you congratulations for your new home. Yes. So I love LA. It is one of my favorite cities. So I know who to contact when I'm in LA. Yes. And we're going to go eat at a fancy restaurant together. And we're going to order whatever we want from the menu. Okay.
Yes.
Also, congratulations to the person out there who also just purchased the home. Congratulations. Ooh. So awesome. Maybe any more questions before we get ready to, ask. I have a final question for Dr. G, but any more questions from any audience members?
Such great questions.
Really good questions. Okay. All righty. Well, let me ask you, Dr. G, anything else that you would like to share regarding today's topic?
Let's see. What can I share? I mean, I definitely want to just emphasize that you all belong in the spaces that you occupy. Nobody did you any favors. You earned it. And it's a function of your qualifications and your credentials that you are where you are today. And Tiara, I wish I would have had a greater opportunity to learn a little bit about your experience with imposterism. I mean, very quickly, you're very well accomplished. You've done extraordinary things. You received all of these accolades, so many awards. What are some of the strategies that you employ when these imposter feelings surface?
Oh, thank you so much. And they still do. They still do. But I feel like for me, and this is I guess why I'm so passionate about even my organization, Speak That Movement, is because I want to equip and empower other women. But a lot of that is because I needed to equip and empower myself. So I really believe in, you know what? I earned this. I work hard for it, and I like to, as I like to say a lot, I like to speak life over myself. I have to do that because I believe that mental health is so real. It is so real, whether people refer to it as, an attack from the enemy or, mental bondage, whatever it might be. Everybody may have different thoughts behind it. But I know for me, I just have to sometimes say, you know what? I'm not entertaining that thought. I have worked for this. I have earned it. And there was a period of time where I was very silent and secretive about my accomplishments because I didn't want other people to feel uncomfortable because of my achievements. So I did a thing that I would like to say is I dimmed my light significantly. But then I got to a point over the years where, to your point, I started looking at my bio and looking at my accomplishments and listening to the people around me who were identifying them. And I just thought, well, I just do what I do. I never made it significant. But then when I started thinking about that, and then most importantly, when I realized that when I gave myself permission to let my light shine, I was actually motivating and inspiring other people. So that's when I said, you know what? I belong in this space. I'm not perfect. It's not about perfection. It's about progression. And that is what kind of helps me overcome. But it still pops in all of the time. But thanks for asking.
I love that. It's about progression, not perfection. You're
absolutely. All right. Well, we have Dr. Horn and Dr. Yoker back. However, we would be remiss. I want to take this time. Someone acknowledged that they had a question that we may have missed. So if it's okay, I would love for us to address that question. Kirsten, perhaps? There we go. And Dr. Yoker as well as Horn, you're on too. So maybe all of you can help answer the question. But Kelly asked, I'm sorry, Kirsten, what about when our own minds are creating the imposter syndrome, not necessarily outside factors or forces? So,
Dr. Yoker and Dr. Horn, what's
your
perspective on that?
Okay, well, first, I want to just, first of all, this conversation has been so enriching. It has been everything that I imagined that it would be. And Angelica and Tiara, I really, really, really appreciate your honesty, your transparency, because, you have to connect to the audience. And there are a lot of people in our audience who have experienced similar things to what you've experienced. And we don't have anybody to talk to about those things. We don't see people of your caliber discussing these things out in an open forum. So thank you for your transparency in discussing these issues and for being so open with our audience tonight. And to answer the question that was just asked, I do think that a lot of what we go through is created within us. And I know my experience has been and continues to be that every day, every morning that I wake up, every day that I'm blessed to open my eyes, it is a new day. And but it's a new day, and I'm thankful to be here. I'm grateful to be here, but it's also a conscious decision to move forward and to block out some of the noise that creates those feelings within our minds. So I want to let you know that, yeah, there are a lot of things that are created within our own minds, but we have to wake up and make a choice daily to block those things out and to play to our strengths and not necessarily to pay so much attention to our weaknesses. Yes, we're going to be working on our weaknesses in the background. We're always going to try to grow. And my slogan in life is to keep it moving. So we're always going to try to keep it moving forward, but we have to make a daily decision to not focus on our weaknesses and to move forward in our strengths and to get to continue to grow and move forward. So that's what I have to say about, what's happening in our own minds. And then for me, I have to make that decision before I tune in to Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. Like, I have to make the decision that I'm going to block those things out before I even tune in to anything else, before I even make the first phone call, because that's what equips me for the day. That's the armor that I have to put on to keep moving forward. What do you think, Dr. Yoker?
Fantastic, very valuable suggestions and remarks. Dr. Horn addressing that question. And it happens to everyone. Those of you in the audience, if you think that someone like me just became a dean of a business school just like that, not without struggles. And I would go back to your question, Kirsten, and say, going back to what Dr. Gutierrez said, first of all, recognizing that there is an issue, recognizing there's an issue. And second of all, what Tara Tucker said, that give yourself permission to shine, right? So recognize there's an issue and give yourself permission to shine. Those are the two things that I would say are amazing, valuable insights today that I would ask you to take away with you. And I've had moments and I've had days and I've had months where I doubted myself, and there was no need for that. It was my demographic, my situation, my own personal mindset. Someone advised me one time, and I do it when I remember to do it. But when you wake up in the morning, look at yourself in the mirror and smile. Look at yourself in the mirror and smile. That is the most important person that you need to recognize, not somebody to your left or right, or your children, your family, your spouse, your friend. All of those come later. Look at yourself in the mirror and smile. And I would ask everyone in the audience that's listening to practice that strategy. And it's very, very, very helpful. And I myself have a 19-year-old who's at USC, Dr. Gutierrez, in University of the World. And as a 19-year-old female, ethnic female, she is having her own issues and going through stages. And I'm there to be a role model for her, but I'm also there to talk about my vulnerabilities and where I came from. And it just does not happen automatically. And helping her handle her internal blockages, right, to shine, as you said, Tiara, sorry. Thank you so much. And Angelica, I'm going to come look you up next time I'm in LA.
Thank you.
We all can go to dinner at a fancy restaurant in LA together.
We should. I just wanted to add something real quick, because Dr. Yoker and Dr. Horn, mentioned growth. And that's something that has taken me a very long time to do, is to actually process these imposter feelings as a sign that we're stepping into greatness. Because when we think about it, we're not going to experience imposter syndrome when we're playing small and when we're staying in our comfort zone. It's when we decide to step outside of it and reach for something bigger and greater that these imposter feelings begin to surface. And that's actually a good thing. We should
It's a very good thing. But also, Angelica, I think that it's very important that we watch who we're around. And as we said in session 2, we talked about watching, what we take in.
Oof.
Right. And join organizations and be around people who will lift you up and who will support you. Angelica and I and Jason Lambert, who's in the background, we all met through an organization called the Ph.D. Project. And we met years ago. And we met at a time when, all of us were stepping into a brand new career.
Yes.
I mean, we were at ground zero, but we were in an organization where the purpose of it was to lift us up and to encourage us and to help us to persist within our PhD programs wherever we were. The purpose of this program is to increase the presence of minorities in the classroom and in the pipeline for getting PhDs. And we have a network of people all over the country that we can call upon. I can call upon Angelica, and she knows who I am, in order to get her to come and speak about imposter syndrome. And I have literally watched her grow to be this phenomenal speaker on this subject. And, we didn't start, neither of us started where we are now, but we had the support of each other in getting where we are today. And that's what I would encourage you all to do, to watch who you're around and make sure out of all of your interactions that you're around some people who can bring you up and encourage you and lift you up, and that you see them rising as you're rising. And you need some people who are already there as well to pull you through. Yes. So,
and I'm going to say, my husband gave me the biggest advice, and I'm going to pass it on to you. When someone compliments you, say thank you. Say thank you. Don't explain it in any other way and attribute it to someone else. Say thank you. And you both have been so amazing today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I want to know, do you all have anything else that you'd like to add to our topic? Tiara, is there anything else that you would like to say? You've been an amazing moderator. Amazing moderator. So I'd like to know if there are any words that you'd like to leave our audience with.
Oh, my pleasure. First of all, again, thank you all so much. I am honored. I believe that this is my assignment to speak to people and to encourage and empower. And I never like to end any event that I'm either moderating, speaking at, or hosting without offering just a few words of encouragement. And Dr. G, I would ask you to do the same. But I just want to encourage everybody out there along your journeys, whether it's your educational journey, your personal journey, your professional journey. Continue to just dream big, believe in yourselves, remove the imposter within yourself, remove those negative thoughts, and believe it. Believe in yourself. Believe in all of those promises that you've received. Believe in all of those thoughts that you have, and speak it. Speak things into existence. There are power in your words. If that imposter steps in, speak it out. If something comes to you and you know you can do it, speak it into existence. And last but not least, the fourth pillar of my Speak That movement is walk it. Walk it, baby. Walk in your destiny. Walk in your purpose. Walk in all of those things that you have been working so hard to achieve, whether it's your graduation, whether it's your new home, your new car, your family, your amazing career. So dream it, believe it, speak it, and walk it, and remove the imposter, because everything you need is already within you. Let that light shine. That's all I have.
Now, when is the next time you're speaking? Because I need to hear more of that. I mean, I need more of that.
Hey, listen.
Mic drop.
Yes, mic drop. I don't have anything else to say. All I have to say is thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. Thank you, Tiara. You have done an amazing job tonight. To our audience, I want to encourage you to please tune in next week, next Tuesday, where we will have two CEOs, two females, minority female CEOs, to speak to you and to tell you about their experiences in the workforce, ascending to their positions and also leading in their positions. So please tune in next week. And then the week after that, guess what? We have someone else who has reached the top. She is recently appointed a board member at a big company at CenterPoint Energy. So make sure that you tune in for our next couple of weeks, next 3 weeks of sessions. And all I have to say is thank you, ladies. And thank you all for tuning in tonight. I appreciate your presence here.
Bye. Thank you so much again. Thank you all.
Bye.